Hi, welcome back to our channel. Today we're looking at chapter 8. Chapter 8 of the book The Ending of Time, and I have good news. We're more than 3/4 through already. So I'm gonna have to rely on my notes heavily today because I'm somewhat preoccupied with a book that I'm finishing up at the moment. So in this chapter we further explored the condition of individuals with insight versus individuals without insight, and we explore the relationship they might have with each other, if any. And the first question that arises is, how does insight affect daily life? And of course, what is meant here is, how does it affect the person who has insight? Since having insight seems to be a rare occurrence, this hypothetical individual that has insight is being juxtaposed with an environment that seems consumed by darkness, or what we could also say seems consumed or living, almost exclusively from the point of view of ego consciousness. So we can clarify this first question a little bit and say instead, what will be the stance or the attitude of someone who operates on insight towards a world that is consumed with ego consciousness? And subsequently, a few answers are given. Firstly, a life lived in ego consciousness is comparable to movement in time, movement in becoming. A man who operates on insight no longer takes part in the process of becoming. He still has to live in the world. A mind free of anxiety and fear is constantly pervaded by the quality of insight. So we acknowledge that a person who has insight, and we discussed in the chapters before that once that insight sets in, it seems to change the individual permanently. So there's no way to go back to simply living in ego consciousness. So the person that now has insight is no longer, albeit still, has to do everyday kind of tasks and has to function, and insofar as they do, they still, obviously need to uphold their, basic identity in terms of, they have a name, they have an address and all that. So, but still they no longer strive to become something, and hence they are no longer preoccupied or, with fear and anxiety, which is linked to this wanting to become, even if the wanting to become is to want to become a better person or better version of oneself. We then explore the relationship between two individuals, one with insight and one without. And from now on, or for that, and then subsequently, I'll rely rather heavily today on excerpts, because that just makes the points clearer. So this is the first one. You have reached and come back. These are approximate terms. And I am an ordinary man living in this world. So what is your relationship to me? Obviously none, because I am living in a world of darkness and you are not. So your relationship can only exist when I come out of it, when darkness ends. Yes. Then there is only that. There is not a relationship. But now there is division between you and me. And I look at you with my eyes, which are accustomed to darkness and to division, but you are not. And yet you have to have some contact with me. You have to have, however superficial, however slight, a certain relationship with me. Is that relationship compassion and not something translated by me as compassion? From my darkness, I cannot judge what compassion is, right? Yes, that follows from that. We then examine possible reactions by a society to such an enlightened individual. And Krishnamurti says, our question until now has been, what will X do with Y? And by X he means the enlightened person, and Y the not enlightened person. But I think we were putting the wrong question. What will Y do with X? I think what would happen generally is that Y would worship, kill, or neglect him, right? And if you go back in history and you examine the relationship that people in general had with quote-unquote enlightened individuals, you'll find that those are pretty much the three reactions that are most commonly observed. Also, then a possible function of the enlightened person in society is examined or explored. Would you say that the function of many X's is to awaken human beings to that intelligence which will dispel the darkness, and that this is X's means of livelihood? Yes. Also, the question with regards to an enlightened person's reach is discussed, because, even if the enlightened person would venture out and, be an emissary for, whatever they are enlightened about, the question is what kind of effect this person could have potentially. What could be their influence apart from talking about their own experience? Either there is more direct action, or X is doing something totally different to affect the consciousness of man. What could this be? Because X is not satisfied with merely preaching and talking. That immensity which he is must have an effect, must do something. Are you saying must in the sense of feeling, of needing to do it, or are you saying must in the sense of necessity? It must. It must necessarily do so. But how will it affect mankind? You see, when you say it would suggest to people that there is some sort of extrasensory effect that spreads. That is what I'm trying to capture. Next, we're called to consider the meaning of enlightenment in a sort of greater scheme of things, and what effect enlightenment of a few has on the many, considering the fundamental assumption that we are all expressions of the same consciousness. Well, since the consciousness emerges from the ground, this activity is affecting all mankind from the ground. Yes. You see, many people will find this very difficult to understand. I'm not interested in many people. I want to understand you, X, and me, Y. That ground, that immensity, is not limited to such a petty little affair. It couldn't be. And we end up with the subsequent question of the role of mankind. The ground includes physically the whole universe. Yes, the whole universe. And to reduce all that to these little activities is also silly. I think that raises the question of what is the significance of mankind in the universe or in the ground. So after clarifying how insight can affect the relationship between people, we now set out to explore a relationship between man and the ground being fundamental consciousness. Also, we explore the topic of agency. Let me ask a question. Why does the ground require this man to operate on mankind? Why can't the ground, as it were, operate directly on mankind to clear this up? Just a minute. Are you asking why the ground demands action? Why does it require a particular man to affect mankind? I want to find out if X says, I am not going to be reduced only to writing and talking. That is too small and petty. And the other question is, why does the ground need this man? It doesn't need him. But when he is there, the ground will use him. That is so. Well, would it be possible that the ground could do something to clear this up? That is what I want to find out. That is why I'm saying, in different words, that the ground doesn't need the man, but the man has touched the ground. Yes. So the ground is using him, let's say, employing him. He's part of that movement. Is that all? Do you follow what I mean? Am I asking the wrong questions? Why should he do anything except this? Well, perhaps he does nothing. That very doing nothing may be the doing. Doing nothing makes possible the action of the ground. It may be that. In doing nothing, which has any specified aim, that's right. No specified content which can be translated into human terms. Yes, but still he is supremely active in doing nothing. You will, when you listen to this attentively, or when you read this text, yourself, you will realize, nuances in this back and forth, of them asking, for example, of them asking if the ground needs man. It's this question implies that that the ground is a entity, or, that has agency, and that in itself is a highly disputed question, of course. Anyone believing in a God would say that this is so. Would say there is an entity that has agency. And I'm saying that because you realize that the two of them, by talking to each other, it's sort of this whole argument is being shaped, where we are witnessing the genesis of a position that in the end we'll be able to talk about. And while that is being, while that position is being sort of shaped, there's a lot of little incongruencies happening. But I'm just saying that so that you will not get hung up, on points like these, but still you should be able to pinpoint them because they're important points, So if we consider what we've learned so far over the course of the book, it seems that insight can only occur when there's no no content, no thought content, and consequently when there is no ego consciousness defining itself through that same content. So insight only occurs when the individual steps out of the bounds of psychological time. And we need to say insight occurs because we do not ascribe it to a subject that is willfully pursuing insight, so which has been, I think, made explicit in other chapters. If there's a wanting to have insight on the part of the individual, then that very wanting, equals becoming, and therefore renders having insight impossible. Also, we learned that once insight occurs, it tends to fundamentally change both the psychology of the brain as well as its mode of operation, its very processing sensory data. We move from constant creation and reproduction of a ego through sensory perception to a kind of pure perception that is somehow instantly in space-time, but also transcendental. And I say instantly because we keep talking about, having to sort of leave the confines of time. And of course, we talk about psychological time mainly. But it seems to point to a point in time, or it seems to, it's really hard to talk about these things. It seems to point to the here and now, and they seem to be saying that only in the here and now can there be insight. And it is observable that people who have insight seem to lose the urge to act upon it. And you witness that, that's probably a telltale sign. There's an expression like that in English. There's a sure sign, in my personal opinion, that someone does not have insight when they, have this Messiah sort of complex, when they need to talk about, when they have this urge to talk about their insight and this urge to sort of turn people around. And I think, to me personally, that's a sign that they don't have insight. And I feel that people who do have insight become very, very calm. They don't become detached from life, I wouldn't say, but they just become very calm. And I think that's where the notion of them having impact despite being quiet comes from, and subsequently the exploration of how that sort of impact could come about, if it wasn't through talking. So it's a fair question to ask whether the mere being insightful, the mere having insight would have an impact without the person acting upon it. I am not satisfied in leaving this immensity to be reduced to some few words. It seems so stupid, so incredible. You see, why is concerned with concepts like show me, prove it to me, what benefit has it, will it affect the future? You follow? He's concerned with all that, and he's looking at X with eyes that are accustomed to this pettiness. So he reduces that immensity to his pettiness and puts it in a temple and has therefore lost it completely. But X says, I won't even look at that. There is something so immense. Please do look at it. But Y is always translating it by wanting demonstration, proof, or reward. He's always concerned with that. X brings light. That's all he can do. Isn't that enough? To bring the light which would allow other people to open to the immensity. Is it like this? We only see a small part, but that very small part extends to infinity. That small part of what? No, we see immensity only as a very small thing, and that immensity is the whole universe. I can't help but think that it must have some tremendous effect on why, on society. Certainly the perception of this must have an effect, but it seems that this is not in the consciousness of society at the moment. I know. But you're saying still the effect is there. Yes. Are you saying that the perception of even a small part is the infinity? Of course, of course. Is it in itself the changing factor? Do you think it is possible that a thing like this could divert the course of mankind away from the dangerous path it is taking? Yes, that is what I think. But to divert the course of man's destruction, somebody must listen. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If that's the case, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.